Well, good afternoon, everyone. I'm delighted to welcome you to Scotland's Towns Partnerships annual tea party and its annual general meeting. Delighted to see you joining us today. My name is Peter Duncan, and for my role today is to host proceedings for you. And I'm delighted that we're all able to see such a fantastic turnout again. It says in my notes that the event's being held in unique circumstances again. I'm not sure whether we can have unique circumstances twice, but it's obviously, we would have preferred to be meeting in person, which I know from many of the names on the attendee list today, you very much enjoy doing on an annual basis. But for the second year in a row, we're doing it virtually. And I hope that you nevertheless find the event helpful and informative, and hopefully leave it with a greater sense of the direction of future travel for Scotland's Towns Partnership, and also for the forthcoming year ahead, as well as discharging the inevitable duties of the annual general meeting. Delighted to have such a tremendous turnout from all across Scotland. I see we've got attendees from as far afield as Shetland and Galloway, and that's a fantastic cross-section of Scotland, whether it's colleagues from business improvement districts or from local authorities or individual members of STP. You're all very welcome and delighted to see you joining us today. Obviously very pleased to welcome our key contributors for the session, and as you're delighted to welcome, I think for one of his very first engagements as the new Minister for Public Finance, Planning and Community Wealth, Tom Arthur MSP. Very pleased to welcome you, Minister, and hope you find the event helpful, and we're looking forward to hearing from you. I know you've been only very recently appointed, and I suppose I'm not too late to pass on our formal congratulations on that appointment, and very grateful for your time in attending at a time of, I'm sure, busy number of commitments in your diary. I'm also pleased to welcome Professor Lee Sparks, the Chair of Scotland's Towns Partnership, who will officiate over the annual general meeting part of the meeting. And then also our third speaker, Phil Prentice, the Chief Officer of Scotland's Towns Partnership, and also the National Director of Scotland's Improvement Districts, who will also give a view later on the way forward over the next year or so. I'm delighted to welcome you wherever you are, and I hope you enjoy the event. I always think a tea party sounds much more enjoyable than annual general meeting, and I hope that you have, wherever you are, got your cup at hand, or maybe even something a bit stronger. We'll shortly move on to the formal part of the event and hear from the Minister and one of his very first contributions. So without any great further ado, I'll pass on to the Minister, but firstly just to say that you'll see that there is the opportunity on your screen to make questions and answers, and we'll hopefully be able to take as many of those at the end of the meeting as possible. Mr. Arthur, unfortunately, has a commitment to vote, which is obviously a very important part of his duties, and has to leave at 10 to 5. But Phil and Lee will very much look forward to answering any questions that we can get through. And I should also say that whilst we'll get through as many as possible, if there are any we don't get to during the event, we'll make sure that we come back to you with as full a reply as we can on any individual issues that require that kind of response. And also you'll see that we very welcome your contributions on social media, where the hashtag is Scotland's Towns, and if you wouldn't mind just tagging on Scotland's Towns in your post, that would be brilliant, and hopefully we'll get a good dialogue happening online as well. So without great further ado, if I could pass on to you, Minister, for your, as I say, one of your first contributions, I suppose, since your appointment, and we'd be very grateful for you, some thoughts perhaps on the way forward and your early thoughts as you take up your new portfolio. Over to you.
Good afternoon, everyone, and thank you for the invitation to the annual Towns Tea Party. and the launch of the 2021 Scotland Loves Local Awards, I am delighted to be appointed as Minister for Public Finance, Planning and Community Wealth, including responsibility for town centre regeneration and business improvement districts. I'm very much looking forward to working with you all to help create a new future for Scotland's towns, maintain a firm focus on a safe recovery from the pandemic, and rebuilding with good jobs and more resilient local economies. That needs to be done with and for local communities so they have a more consistent and embedded stake in our economy and can share in the wealth that flows from it. I am determined in taking on this role that our towns and town centres play a key role in our recovery and renewal, and it's vital that we work together to support them as much as possible. Having grown up in Barhead or Barhead, if you're from the area, a small post-industrial town in East Renfrewshire, and now living in Johnston, another small post-industrial Renfrewshire town, I'm familiar with many of the issues and opportunities faced by towns of the length and breadth of the country. Our towns provide us with a fascinating storybook of our journey as a nation. They are our heritage and a part of our DNA. Their stories both inspire us and challenge us. Taking together, they provide a deep and rich tapestry of invention and cultural heritage that is now woven into a network which forms the lifeblood of our country. In the post COVID climate emergency world, we have a great opportunity for our towns to positively support our social, environmental, and economic future. The Place Based Initiative programme and the commitment for a Scotland Loves Local programme demonstrate the Scottish Government's commitment to their recovery and renewal. The Place Based Investment Programme, backed with £325 million of capital investment over 5 years, gives a longer term means to support our shared ambitions for place, town centre revitalisation, community led regeneration, 20-minute neighbourhoods, and community wealth building. It includes the continued delivery of the successful town centre and regeneration capital grant funds and ongoing sponsorship of Clyde Gateway, with £140 million funding being allocated directly to Scotland's local authorities over 5 years. Since last summer, our Scotland Loves Local national marketing campaign has been encouraging people across Scotland to support their local communities and businesses safely during the pandemic. I know that the campaign has been extremely popular and has been welcomed at both local and national levels, receiving cross-party support. I would like to thank STP and Message Matters for their considerable work on this campaign. We also want to build on the recommendations of a new future for Scotland's town report. Our new policies must focus more on people, planet and economy. And in government, we look forward to refreshing our town centre action plan later in the year. An approach which will aim to strengthen the existing national policy context, which, while positive towards place and town centres, needs to provide more formal and structured prioritisation, support and encouragement. We must also be radical and consider stopping investing in things which cause harm to town centres, our vision for them, and our ambitions for tackling climate change and social renewal. We need to focus on activities and initiatives where building on and extending current approaches to the new town centres would accelerate progress, and to learn from those places already making solid progress. The renewed growth in localism and community resilience has helped steer us through the pandemic and will provide the foundations to progress our net zero ambitions and build our communities and local economies. Our Scotland Loves Local programme has encouraged resilience, innovation, leadership, compassion and community across the country. To build on this momentum, I'm delighted to announce the launch of the 2021 Scotland Loves Local Awards. The awards are a celebration of all that is great about our nation's towns and neighbourhoods, recognising and rewarding dedication, innovation and commitment towards shaping a sustainable, successful future with localism at its heart. They are about highlighting the people, places and projects which are leading the way in making a difference, delivering benefits which will help make our communities greener, stronger and fairer, whether through design, delivery, or sheer determination. The award will include the commendation of a high street hero, a business or organisation that has gone above and beyond to support those around them. The event will also celebrate inspirational leaders, those who embrace heritage and culture to the benefit of their community, positive placemakers and businesses who are doing their bit for and responding to the climate emergency. The awards are all about the people who are at the heart of why Scotland loves local. So in closing, I'd like to wish the best of luck to all who enter, and I look forward to seeing the finalists at the Scotland Loves Local Awards in November. Thank you.
Minister, thank you very much. That's great to hear of the launch of the new Scotland Loves Local Awards, which I'm sure there'll be an opportunity to chat about during Q&A, and also to hear of the kind of renewed vision, I suppose, and re-endorsement of the programme of supporting a sustainable future for Scotland's towns. So delighted you're able to join us. I know you're on a tight timescale for voting, so feel free to slip off whenever you need to. But thanks again for joining us. I'll now, if I may, pass on the baton, so to speak, to the chair of STP, Scotland's Towns Partnerships, Professor Lee Sparks. Professor Sparks, as you may well know, is also Professor of Retail Studies and Deputy Principal for Education and Students at the University of Stirling. Lee, over to you for the exciting business of the annual general meeting, which I know you'll discharge your responsibilities in that regard with your usual aplomb. Over to you.
Thanks, Peter. Good afternoon, everyone. And as you rightly said, Peter, I draw a little bit of the short straw today, sandwiched between the Minister and Bill Prentice. So I'll have to take us through a range of technical aspects and very formal aspects in terms of the annual general meeting of Scotland's Towns Partnership. And we've got 4 items, as has broadly been put up on the slide in front of you. The first is to consider and approve the financial accounts for the year ending March 31st, 2020. A copy of the accounts have been made available on the website and will be offered to members on request if anyone hasn't been able to or wants access to them. You will note, of course, that our reporting year and the annual general meeting are not quite aligned at the moment, and we've been in the practice of reporting on the previous financial year, hence the end March 2020. We aim to realign that next year and get these back into sync if we possibly can. I'm now going to read a statement based on the information from our accountant Soroban for the accounts for the year to end 31st of March 2020. The income for the year to 31st of March 2020 of £442,681,000 includes conference and events income of £18,050, membership fees of £21,622, sponsorship of £31,527, project income of £24,482, and Scottish Government funding of £347,000. Expenditure was £396,140, which resulted in a surplus after tax of £37,080. The surplus mainly arose through the delay in recruitment of a project director. The balance sheet reserves at the end of the year were £98,214. I re-emphasise that is to the end year March 2020. I am seeking members' approval for that, if I may. If you don't say anything, I'll take that up silence to be approval. If you have any queries about the accounts, please put them in the chat. They will be noted. We'll ask the details to the accountants and we'll provide personal responses to all of the inquirers. So I'll pause for a moment in case there are any comments to be put in the chat or the Q&A. If not, I am assuming that we have members' approval for the accounts to the end of March 2020. The second item for consideration as the AGM is to seek members' approval to consider and to review the accountants for next year and to appoint the accountants, as the slide says, Soroban, for the next year. And again, unless I hear anything to the contrary, I will take that as passed. I'm not seeing anything, so thank you for that. Thirdly, I have to note for you the election of directors. And since our last AGM this time last year, we have appointed 4 further directors to the board. And these are Claire Carpenter, Hilary Kidd, Fergus Murray, and Alison Turnbull. Since the last AGM, I can report there have been no resignations from the board. And then finally, I want to say a little bit about activities since last June, the company's progress. You've had the financial part, and here are some details in terms of activities since our AGM in June of last year. Fairly obviously, this year has been a COVID year. We were at the start of the pandemic in June of last year, and COVID-19 has presented us with probably the greatest global challenge in living memory. I think through that, in terms of STP, we've shown strong and determined leadership, and I pay tribute to those in the team behind Phil, as well as Phil himself. And I think we've shown leadership throughout the crisis, and I believe we'll continue to show that leadership through the recovery and renewal, which hopefully is now beginning. I think our achievements during the year have been fairly impressive. In association with the Scottish Government and with a range of different partners. And I'll identify a number of key items perhaps as part of those activities over the year. I'd also say that I have put up on my own personal blog, sterlingretail.com, a short review of many of the things that have been done by STP over the year, and more details available on the STP website. I think I'd point to half a dozen things that are quite important. Firstly, in terms of assisting the Scottish Government, we've assisted the Scottish Government in protecting bids via the Coronavirus Scotland Act of 2020. Secondly, and deriving partly from that, STP and Scotland's improvements districts supported 357 place-based projects with Scottish Government funding. More than 3.6 million was allocated across Scotland via the COVID-19 Bid Resilience Fund, the Towns and Bid Resilience and Recovery Fund, and also the Scottish Loves Local Fund. Thirdly, we've delivered and implemented, as it was heard before, aspects of the National Scotland Loves Local campaign, and I think there's more to come around that particular activity. And it's great in the little bits of Scotland I've been able to get out and about to, seeing how much Scotland Loves Local is mentioned in local areas and by local communities as that's been used. Fourthly, and very personally, STP was involved in facilitating and supporting the review that the Cabinet Secretary asked me to conduct on the Town Centre Action Plan, and which was published in February of this year, entitled A New Future for Scotland's Towns. And the support was absolutely vital to getting it done in a very tight timescale and in terms of the pandemic. And now the hard work begins in terms of turning those recommendations, considering them in more detail, and looking at how we can implement them, as the Minister said in his presentation earlier. And the review, as you hopefully have read and have seen, has recommendations under 3 broad areas, and the Minister reflected those earlier. I think there is more to be done on the policy context. I think we have to be radical, as he said, in terms of stop supporting activities which are harming our town centres and rebalance that playing field in many different ways. And then we need to extend our activities and approaches all in the way of people, planet and the economy, all about health and well-being and about addressing our national priorities and also the climate emergency. Fifthly, in terms of our achievements, I think we have pivoted very quickly to an online platform. We're very used to it now, I think, in all of our lives in many ways. But in terms of STP, we continued with an extremely successful events and CPD programme, and also the cross-party group, as well as assisting the Scottish Government and COSLA with national webinars, amongst which probably the highlight is the £18 million Towns Capital Fund. And then finally, I think in terms of the challenges we face, COVID is one of those. The climate is clearly another one. And I think towns are absolutely fundamental to that. And as we move into a sustained recovery, collectively, STP, I think, has begun that process of striving to build that new future for Scotland's towns, something about which I'm obviously very passionate, but also very positive about the future that Scotland Towns has. So that's by way of my summary of the progress over the year. It's been an incredibly active year, despite our constraints. And I think I would again pay tribute to the team behind STP, Phil Prentice as our Chief Officer, Kimberly Guthrie in terms of the work that she's been doing, and also all of the partners who've been in association with the work of STP. And I'll hand back to you at that point, Peter, as that I think concludes the main part of the AGM business.
Thank you very much, Lee. That's fantastic. I know I've got some questions already coming in, some of them relating to issues that you've raised in your review of the year, and perhaps we can come to them in the Q&A session at the end. And again, just a little reminder, if there's any particular issues that members of the audience want to raise, then use the Q&A button at the bottom of your screen, and we'll do our best to get through as many of those issues as we can in conversation at the end of the event. So that then brings us on to the third of our contributors, and I'm delighted to welcome to speak about future plans of Scotland's Towns Partnership. It's Chief Officer Phil Prentice, who's also National Director, as you'll all, I'm sure, know, of Scotland's Improvement Districts. Phil, over to you for a look ahead, I suppose, primarily as to what's coming up for Scotland's Towns Partnership in the coming year. Over to you.
Thanks, Peter and Lee, and thanks to the Minister for coming along and supporting us today as well. Good evening, everybody. Thanks for attending our AGM and our annual Towns Tea Party. I think I'm the only one in sight that's actually remembered to bring some tea and a bun, but also the launch of our Love Local Awards. Just picking up on Lee's last point, the new future for Scotland's towns gives us a direction. It's a real positive sense of where we need to go next with the whole agenda. You know, there has been unimaginable difficulties throughout the last 15 months, but we've also witnessed a lot of positives that we need to consolidate. Community spirit, local leadership, compassion, forbearance, creativity, and the willingness to adapt. Our partnerships, improvement districts in particular, have led by example, and they've shown us what can be achieved when you get local collaboration, local leaders working with local communities, working with businesses. You know, whenever the emergency came, people stood up to the plate and they reacted really positively. Now, I know this has dragged on a lot longer than anybody ever imagined, but we just need to consolidate the positives that we've learned from the pandemic. So moving on to the renewal and the positives, COVID has changed everything. Combined with the existential threats and opportunities around climate, Brexit, inequalities, I don't think we'll ever have a better opportunity to be radical in resetting Scotland as a nation that works for everybody and is ambitious in terms of climate, demography, community wealth, more equalities. So this is a time of opportunity and we need to grasp it. We are a nation of towns, I keep saying that, and the partnership and its a broad umbrella of stakeholders have a pivotal role to play in supporting our government, local government, our communities, our stakeholders in driving forward these positive changes. So what will our next steps be? At STP, we will continue to support the work of our members, the Scottish Government, local government, and the communities through recovery. In particular, we are going to continue to support towns, bids and place projects with government funding, and that's going to support a range of hyperlocal capital and revenue investments. Pleased to announce that the bids are in the process of receiving a further tranche of funding, which will be issued by the end of the month. And hopefully that just builds in a wee bit more resilience so these guys can continue with their They're hyper-local interventions and the support to their levy payers and beyond, not just to levy payers, but to their wider communities. We've seen some great examples across the country where, you know, they've been supporting vulnerable, not just thinking about themselves, but others around them. So the Scottish Government funding should take them through towards autumn, by which time we hope that we'll be on a more resilient footing. The rollout of the Love Local programme, First Minister announced an additional £10 million as part of the manifesto pre-election. We haven't discussed that in depth with Scottish Government yet. Obviously, ministers are still being appointed and we're at that phase where portfolios are being discussed, but we will get round to that. But undoubtedly, there will be another Love Local programme. This will include some form of funding, a national marketing campaign, and the Town and City gift card platform. The uniqueness around Scotland's approach here is that this is a closed loop system. It does not allow people to go online and spend their money with the online giants. It actually locks in expenditure at the local authority level and also to businesses within that local economy. So you get that multiplier effect, and it just reinforces the good behaviour of active travel, sustainability, community resilience, and community wealth. You're actually rewarding your local businesses that helped us through the pandemic by spending your money or spending your gift card in that local economy. All backed up by the national media campaign with STV, Borders TV, NewsQuest, Press and Journal, and the social media and digital content that we have. Most people in Scotland have come across the Love Local campaign over the last year, and it has been a positive light in a time of darkness. It has given communities, as Professor Sparks pointed out, you go into your local community and you see the branding and the imagery in a lot of the shop windows. People have really embraced this as a sense of hope moving forward. We'll also support and facilitate the recommendations that came out of the New Future for Scotland's Towns. Whenever you read Professor Sparks' review, there's two versions. There's a simple version and there's a more complex technical document. On the face of it, they seem pretty straightforward. You know, they all make sense, but when you delve into it, there's a lot that needs to be addressed. So we're in the process now of running a series of stakeholder sessions over the summer to tease out some of the, you know, what are the laws of unintended consequences? What are the bigger asks in here? What can we do in Scotland? What's actually still reserved at Westminster, maybe even beyond, around digital sales tax, moratorium on out-of-town development, car parking levies, etc. There's a lot that needs to be worked out, and we're in the process of doing that now. We hope to be able to submit a final response in the autumn, and we hope then that the Scottish Government can respond to that, which would in fact give us a new town centre action plan to take forward into the next year. So the New Future for Scotland's Towns is a big priority for us. We're also going to continue to facilitate the Parliamentary Cross-Party Group. It's one of the most well-attended groups in Parliament. Obviously, town centres are complex things and city centres are complex. They involve a whole range of competing interests and a wide family of stakeholders. So this is a great platform to raise political focus on the agenda. And I think undoubtedly this time is the time for towns, the renaissance, and also to reinvent our cities. I don't think there's ever been as big a focus politically in terms of how we deal with climate and how we use our towns and cities much more strategically as economic, social and environmental assets. So we look forward to facilitation of the cross-party group. We're also going to launch a Digital Towns Toolkit. We already have a town toolkit up on our web platform, which it consolidates all the best, the learning from across the country, so people don't have to reinvent the wheel. So it started off with how to make your place more active, more attractive, more accessible. We have added much more to that to take into account the changing demographic, the need to repopulate more in our town centres, the climate agenda, the growth of digital, etc., the continued structural shifts in retail, etc. So and there's a COVID section as well. So we will hopefully by the end of this month be launching a new Digital Towns Toolkit. And again, we will be continuing to support our partnerships, our communities, our towns, our business improvement districts throughout the year through a series of CPD, learning support sessions, webinars, the Scotland Loves Local Awards that have just been launched, and a whole range of marketing and positive social media, just to make sure that everybody's aware of the potential, the art of the possible, because so many communities are now desperately trying to make their places better. And they've understood that this is their local community, this is their culture, their heritage, their DNA, and everybody's got a role to play in all of that. So I am going to sign off now before we go to Q&A. I would just like to offer sincere thanks to the Cabinet Secretary, also to the team at STP who have had to adapt, like every other business in Scotland, they've had to adapt very quickly and change tack and pivot, and they have responded extremely well, and they've really stepped up to the plate to do as much as possible to help all of our members and beyond. I'd like to thank Scottish Government colleagues that we work with in civil service, but also local government. We're building closer bridges to local government because ultimately, at the end of the day, local government are going to be the key decision makers at that hyper local level. Also, the support of our members and our sponsors and our stakeholders, and a big thank you for just all the positivity around today's event. Simply, if you take a look at Professor Sparks's review, it says, let's reward good behaviour. Let's reward the people that are doing the right thing, and let's start to punish the people that are doing harmful behaviour. So hopefully together, collectively, we can build a new future for Scotland's towns. Thanks for your time.
Thank you, Phil. It was really interesting, and going by that description, there's another very busy year ahead for Scotland's Towns Partnership. If we move on then to the Q&A section of the agenda, and hopefully we'll make this as discursive as possible. A good number of questions in which I'll maybe, if the questioners are happy, I'll try and perhaps merge them together if that's possible. And as I say, that assurances that if there's any issues we don't get to during the discussion, we'll certainly make sure we come back to you individually. Perhaps maybe start with you, Lee. What question is effectively asking for your reflections on the impact. Obviously, this has been a 15-month, year-and-a-half period, which we could never have predicted 2 years ago. But what's your summing up of the impact on town centres themselves over the last period, and where are you seeing encouraging signs of resilience, and where are you seeing the big challenges which perhaps have yet to emerge?
Okay, thanks, Peter. A big question. If we think about, I don't think you can produce a single answer to that. We've always said that towns and places are unique. We always suggest that they have very different things to build on, very different assets to build on. And if you think about how they've been affected, how different places have been affected, I think there's a variability across the piece. If, for example, trying to compare the issues that central Edinburgh or central Glasgow have with some of the behaviours, some of the situations we see in local smaller towns, they are very different. They are related to some degree, but not wholly related. And therefore, I don't think there's one simple answer to this. What have we seen? If I take the retail point, we've obviously seen retail sales in some sectors grow quite markedly. Food. We've obviously seen online grow and drop back a little bit, but still have a big acceleration in terms of online. We've seen non-food be in very difficult situations. Hospitality, we know in towns and cities, is in a very difficult place, and tourism has been very badly hit. So the way people behave, the way people move, is differentially impacting particular places and towns. On the more positive side, I think, but it does depend where you are based and where you come from, that sense of exploration of a local area, a sense of communities pulling together, the sense of understanding what's happening in a local place, I think has become much more apparent. And as a consequence of that, I think there is a greater appreciation of local in a physical town place element, what's around, but also in the sense of what makes that place special, different, distinct, and what we value about it. And we value, I think we've shown we value wanting to go out, to be with people, to experience things. And I think those will become much more important as we recover and as we go forward. I would make a slight plea, and I've been guilty of this as much as anyone else. We hear the word resilient a lot. And we use it a lot. And I think we need to be a wee bit careful that we don't somehow think resilient is going back to what it was, return to normal. For a lot of our communities, a lot of our places, and a lot of our population, what was pre the pandemic was not working for those communities. It wasn't working for town centres. And so if we fall into a trap of saying resilient is back to what it was, I think we'll have missed a real opportunity. If resilient means strengthening local economics, building social networks within a local community, building those relationships, I think we've got a really good platform. But we need to get that right, and that is about growing localism, growing the best of what we've seen, and really rebuilding what we've got in town centres through things such as was in the review that we did. Sorry, a slightly long-winded answer, Peter.
No, it's as you said in your introduction, it's a complex area. I mean, Phil, you presumably, as you've reached out in the discussions with business improvement districts and town centres across the country over the last 18 months, you'll have seen that, I suppose, determination in communities to get through it, but also almost use this crisis as a platform to reimagine their town centres. I suppose some quite inspiring stories you'll see across the country.
Yeah, and picking up from what Professor Sparks said, there's not been huge change in terms of the trends. I mean, what COVID has done is exacerbate trends that were already in place. We lived in an extractive economy. We had too many clone towns. The economy was fragile in terms of what local people were getting out of it, and they felt distant from it. I think the Scottish Government have done an awful lot of good work around developing the place principle and the place standard to bring in a wider stakeholder approach. And I think that's going to be critical. We all need to, all hands to the pump in terms of recovery, driven by the need of the community, first and foremost, and finding those leaders at a local level who are prepared to do that shift. So I think there are trends that have just been exacerbated, the shift in retail, that will have good positive outcomes in terms of a correction in property values, which will then open up to opportunities for social enterprise and more community activity. Primarily, we need to build confidence. We need to get the safety message to continue, because we obviously have a couple of variants and we don't want to go back a step in time. Obviously, that would be very, very difficult for businesses to be able to countenance that. So we need to keep on that path of recovery, which means everybody has their part to play. But yes, I have to say I have been inspired this year by seeing just how quickly local leaders stepped up and delivered. And without a thought for themselves, there was a lot of selflessness in all of this. So that's short term, it's reactionary. How do you bottle that and consolidate it moving forward as things do start to return to some sense of stability? And I do agree with Lee, we do not want to go back. We need to build something that's different. We need to hook onto the uniqueness of the place, the assets that are already there, how to make them work harder for the community. Just have those hard discussions about what needs to be disinvested and what new investments are on the horizon, how we can actually deliver that collectively. Climate's going to be a key driver, big opportunity. So if we get this right and we use procurement, we can start to develop new housing concepts that will allow for a density that can support 20-minute neighbourhoods, which will ultimately contribute towards our climate net zero ambitions. And that just gives a whole army of supply chain an opportunity to engage, which builds wealth in this country. So we can, if we do it right with the proper leadership, build back better and build compelling places that people will want to come and live in and enjoy. The biodiversity angle in terms of greening places up will no doubt make places more attractive for people. And we just have to think, put people first rather than profit, and make sure that we're actually nurturing our environment and doing the right thing. This is a time of opportunity. This is a time for everybody to grasp the positives. So like Lee, I'm really looking forward to working with all the positive stakeholders over the next couple of years as we rebuild again.
Just you mentioned that sense of people wanting to live, work, and in more tighter localities, and I suppose that's the heart of the idea of the 20-minute neighbourhood, which is so widely mentioned in both government, it was obviously extensively name-checked in the News Feature for Scotland's Towns report, but also in Scottish Government pronouncements at the moment. How do you see the timeline for actually repurposing communities across? I mean, if this is going to be the new model we work with, what are going to be the triggers that actually make it happen? So take it off the design, off the policy document, and move it into reality across Scotland.
Well, I mean, it has to be embedded in policy to begin with. We need to get the structures right from the top. And the work that Professor Sparks led has taken us into those discussions around National Planning Framework 4, about making sure that all of these concepts are embedded into not just planning policy, but into economic policy, into climate policy, into the social justice agenda. So it's, I suppose the role of STP has always been as a trusted friend in the middle, a friend to local government, a friend to central government, the credible broker that pulls all the complex bits together. So there's going to be a lot of brokerage, because at the minute I'm seeing a lot of people running off with good intentions trying to do the right things, but they're maybe doing a bit of duplication, overlapping. So there's a big role for STP to play in all of that. I don't think we've got time to procrastinate about climate. I think we have to just move forward fastly with ambition, being radical, to actually make this agenda happen now. We are already starting to live in 20-minute neighbourhoods. We need to make sure that either through new development or retrofitting or using existing assets, we pivot very quickly into that to make sure that, you know, there's all this stuff available for people. There's going to be opportunities, Peter. If you look at the continued shift in retail, for example, there's a huge demand for people's health and well-being. So we spoke to the Observatory for Sport in Scotland yesterday, who are now looking at, could we engage with some of the owners of that retail to repurpose it into health and well-being initiatives? We're not talking about sport. We're just talking about activities that people would actually, could improve their mental health or their physical health. So there are different uses. Repopulate in a more dense context. Think about new housing products for aging demographic, for young people who want to engage with the housing market slightly different than we did. There are a host of opportunities around digital resilience to make sure that we actually have the bandwidth that's required for people to work and to learn. But I suppose the fundamental question is, if you ask most people, and I'm probably one of the exceptions because I enjoy getting out and about and meeting people and doing the deals, but a lot of people are actually more comfortable now with that blended approach of maybe 3 days at home, 2 days in the office. And one of the biggest, if not the biggest contributor to net zero is transport. So if we are taking a lot of transport off the road, that's going to be a positive thing. People then can engage with their local communities much more readily in terms of active travel and walking and cycling and just enjoying their heritage and green space around them. So I don't think this will be a long time in policy. I think this will start, we'll see this on the ground around us literally from now onwards.
Okay, thanks, Phil. Lee, this but one perhaps for you. A questioner asks, the town centre review was very strong on controlling out-of-town retail, but the Scottish Government COSLA response seemed to be a little less committal. How can we create a strong town centre focused response to planning that tackles trends such as drive-throughs, etc.?
I think I'd say that the review that we did didn't just focus on out-of-town retail. If you look at the moratorium and the car parking levy and some of the other cost structures we put in there, it applies to a range of out-of-town activities. It doesn't just apply to retail. So we need to think about all of these elements, because if we think about where it came from, and we think about the climate part of it, we think about all of the sustainable and inclusive elements that towns have. We need to rebalance all of the activities, not just retailing activities. I would wait and see how we work through the more detailed aspects of some of the recommendations and what is implementable, how that can be done, and then how that fits together before I say what Scottish Government or COSLA will do about it. It is a challenging agenda. It's also an agenda we've spent 50 years trashing our town centres. We're not going to solve this in the 4 months after the review report comes out. But I think there is, if we're going to be at all serious about climate change, if we're going to be at all serious about town centres, And if we're going to be serious about actually improving them and not wasting money in many ways, we will have to address the harm that is being done to town centres by a range of activities. And so I'm hopeful there will be more positive noises coming out in due course. And through the review, whilst there clearly are controversial elements to it, there was quite a lot of support for some of those aspects that we've put in play there. I'd like to think that will then now coalesce and then we can deliver on it.
And a similar kind of question. Well, this is more about town centre ownership. I know that ownership structures and community engagement was a big focus for the review. This questioner asks, who's encouraged to hear the desire to stop supporting activities which cause harm. She asks, in towns where there are only a handful of landowners controlling majority of retail and other spaces, how can we ensure that community-led recovery can improve our town centres in a way that directly benefits communities and natural environment, and not just larger businesses which happen already to be established in those town centres?
I think if you look at, it will vary obviously by place to place. If you look at many places, I think there are property owners and businesses to those town centres. There's needs on that, and I think there are opportunities there for small social enterprises, community groups, and for local authorities. What I think we need to do is make sure we get the support for them right. So it's not just about getting the asset, it's about how they can run that asset for the benefit of communities. So I think there are real opportunities for doing that. And I think we will see property owners wanting to release in many ways because of what they've lived through and what they're continuing to live through. If that doesn't work, then I suspect there may be more directive things that might have to be done as a consequence, because we do need to change that mix. It's not one or the other, but it's to get the mix right.
Great, thank you. Phil, one more for you. Question asked, what's the long-term potential for the local gift card platform? So not just for this year, but where could this go in the longer term horizon?
Yeah, I mean, I really am excited by the potential of the gift card platform. In order to get the intervention out and up, the infrastructure built, we basically went with a prepaid MasterCard branded up Scotland Loves Local, GPS tracked to the local authority level. So the 32 local authorities have their own Love Local platform. But if we move forward and you think of some of the innovative ways that this has been deployed, East Ayrshire Council, for example, who were a Pathfinder project, they loaded on hundreds of thousands of pounds to support poverty. So at Christmas time, the beneficiaries of the card were directly targeted through SIMD data. That allowed those people dignity to actually go and get Christmas dinners without having to go to food banks, etc. So there's no way to distinguish whether the person's rich or poor or whatever. Come Easter, the East Ayrshire again loaded a load of cards, and that allowed people from the most challenged areas to buy school uniforms for their kids as they went back to school. So local government have got a big role to play. We can target young people. We can think about how corporates deploy this card. We can think about the Scots diaspora. So we are engaged at all levels. We've got strong support from all of the umbrella bodies, the Scottish Retail Consortium, the Scottish Grocers Federation, Federation of Small Business, Scottish Chambers of Commerce, and they're all actively, also our own bid network, they're all actively now onboarding their members within their town centres. So this is going to grow exponentially, I would reckon. Over the next year or so, we will see tens of thousands of businesses onboarded to this platform potentially. So ultimately, in the future, if you are wanting to gift a relative up in Perth, for their birthday or Christmas, you should at least have that knowledge that the Scotland Loves Local gift card is a big option. In order to improve things as it evolves, we're also looking at developing an app and a sort of credit card, digital renewable card. At the minute they're sustainable, but they are not reusable just at present. But that was just for the speed of trying to get things up and running. If truth be told, I think this is a huge potential. We could create a Scottish Amazon, something of that scale that just allows people to do the right thing. And that money is totally locked into local economies. The multiplier effect of which is somewhere between 2.5 to 3 times. So every pound that is spent in that local economy, you'll get another £2 to £3 locked into the local economy, and it'll keep local jobs for longer. It will allow supply chains to be secured, more food security, etc. To me, it's a no-brainer. We just need to keep expanding the programme as it evolves. So I'm pretty excited by it, Peter, to be honest. I think it's got a lot of potential to support our towns and cities.
Can I add one thing, Peter, just very briefly?
Of course, yes, sure, crack on.
Which is, I'd like to think, particularly given the community we're talking to here this evening, that anyone who actually uses vouchers in their business, in any of their organisations, and the university here does, I'd like to think that we'd be switching from having Amazon vouchers to local gift cards of these forms, because I think there's a real opportunity here for us collectively to work together. And that sort of ties much more closely in the end of what Phil says, much more tightly to what I think our definition of resilience should be, as opposed to, you know, why on earth are we giving money to a corporation running everything through Luxembourg, paying zero tax, and really not helping our town centres in any way, shape or form.
Certainly a good opportunity for everyone to walk the walk, as well as talk the talk, that's for sure on that issue. I've got a question. This is probably one for you, Lee. I'm seeing people respond and relate to their towns differently, having experienced their towns effectively being taken away from them. Town as a social space seems to be much more significant as a result. Are we recognising this enough in planning and public policy?
Yeah, one of the features of a lot of what gets done is that we tend to measure entirely the wrong things, and we need to think how we actually can rebalance that, which I think then begins to open up those sort of conversations. So we mentioned things about, we look at things about vacancy rates, which focuses immediately on particular buildings and particular types of buildings. But actually the streetscape, what happens in the streets, what happens in the spaces around it, become much more important. And if we can green many of those spaces, make them much more attractive, that obviously will help in terms of the environment, but also help in terms of the attractiveness of a particular place. Are we doing enough about it? I think perhaps probably not. And I think that's partly because we tend to look a little bit too much when we think about our town centres as purely the economic components of it. So we do have to build in much more of that understanding of the social, the interaction part of it. And that is, I think, what people have valued increasingly over the last few months. So more to do, I suspect.
Thank you. And this, I think, will just need to be our last question. And this one probably, Phil, for you. Straight question. Will there be a 21-22 town centre grants scheme?
Need to ask the Scottish Government. I would hope so. As I've mentioned earlier, there will be a grant fund for business improvement districts. The Scotland Loves Local Fund potentially, but that still has to be decided by Scottish Government civil servants and the Minister. They are discussing all of this just now, but as I mentioned, the ministers have just been appointed into their roles. You need to give them a couple of weeks just to settle down and begin the dialogue, but I would be hopeful.
Great stuff. Thank you very much, both. Could I maybe just pass over back to you again, Lee, just for some closing remarks and votes of thanks, whatever you'd like to pass on.
Thanks, Peter. If I could just say a few words of thanks on behalf of STP. Obviously, thank you all for attending today, but also thank you for what you've been undoubtedly doing over the last 15 months or so of the pandemic and beyond that. But it's been obviously that much more important in the last 15 months. And to say thanks for what you probably will be asked to do and what you hopefully will contribute to the town's agenda, which I think is a really exciting agenda over the coming year and the coming months and the coming years. I'm really positive about what we can do in towns if we get this right. There's a lot of hard work to be done, but I think we're in the right place to begin to do that and realise what really is important. So I hope we'll have a great year in terms of STP and all the partners and businesses that are here. But by way of closing, can I also just thank the team behind tonight's event, as well as yourself, Peter, for chairing it. Thank the Minister for his presentation, and I hope for what he is about to deliver in terms of the next few months from Scotland's government's point of view. And also thank Phil for saying that he's got an ambition to take over and be bigger than Amazon. I think I might need to rein him in slightly if I can.
The very best of luck with that ambition. So I think we're just about at time. Just to wind up, to confirm, we'll after the event we'll be circulating to you all, and indeed the wider in the entire membership, the digital report, and also that will go with a link to the recording of this meeting. So if my colleagues that you would like to share that with, and please feel free to do that. As I said, any questions we haven't got to, and there were quite a number, we'll endeavour to reply to them directly with you. And thanks very much for your participation in that Q&A. I hope you found the answers and the discussion helpful. And also just a nod in the ministerial contribution earlier on. You'll have heard that we're going to have the Scotland Love Local Awards this year. Some of that detail again will come out with the response that you get from us after the meeting, but do look out for further information on how you can get yourselves involved, and also your communities and those within them involved in that awards programme. I think that brings us to the end of the event, to the tea party and its annual general meeting. Thank you again for joining us. I hope you've enjoyed it, and whilst we enjoy these virtual events, we're very hopeful of seeing you in person next year. And in the meantime, thank you very much, and good evening.